Hello everyone, my name is Sheen and welcome back to my channel. Today I show you how I built this beautiful temple ruin for Digital Blob's Shell Challenge in 7 days. Let me first start by telling you that this Shell Challenge is part of a fundraiser he's doing this Friday for WWF UK, where he will tour all of the submissions he gets. So make sure to check the stream out. So now let's get into the building process. We are starting with day 1, where I only was able to get the basic structure of my habitats. My first idea was to have 2 habitats, one for the tiger and one for the gharial. You can see me here figuring out how I want the habitats to be. I tried to get the guest passing down, and then I tried building 2 underwater views for the animals, so that the guests will be able to see the gharial and the tiger diving. I soon realized that the shell is too tiny for this, so I scrapped the idea of having 2 separate underwater viewing areas. In the end, I settled for one water area at the back of the shell where you could see them diving. Also, I abandoned the idea of having a gharial in the second habitat and settled instead for the orangutan and maybe some gibbons. It wasn't really decided at that point. For this build, I downloaded Freebuild, and oh boy did I use that very heavily in this build. You can see me at multiple times doing terrain work over the pass or putting barriers over each other without the game telling me it can be done. It was really a godsend because I didn't have the space to get everything so worked that it was working how I wanted it to be, so it was really helpful, and I think I will never get back to playing without it. And while we are on the topic of mods, I also downloaded a bunch of remasters for different animals. So you will see in this video the remaster of the Bengal tiger, and yeah, in the future if you see any animals that do not look like in your game, I probably have the remaster installed for it. As it turned out, I was not happy with the habitat layout and I wanted to have a tiger overpass, so I changed the habitat layout to incorporate that. After that, I got to work on the water area. I built a little waterfall that would be the separation between the tiger and the ape habitat. And with that, we are now on to day 2, where I cannot show you a speed build since my recording was not working correctly. But after I fixed that issue, I made sure to at least give you a brief tour. So you can see I decided to have a second pass on the first floor. It was supposed to go to the water so you could see the animals swimming from above. I decided to go for an Indian temple ruin, and my main inspiration was, in the beginning, the Jungle Book. So yeah, that's maybe because I was thinking of having the Bengal tiger as Shere Khan, the orangutan as King Louis, and the exhibit animal that we should have included as Car. So yeah, I put for that roughly the Indian walls where the habitat barriers are to get a feeling on how the temple ruin would look. And I also made a little information center that looks more like a souvenir shop, and without further ado, we are on to day 3. Day 3 was primarily used to get the walls done. I decided to use the Indonesian temple bricks, which would be the reason for my large piece count that I have in the end. I deleted the bricks to get glass panels as viewing areas in them, and then the day of placing walls truly began. After I did not even do half of the walls, I decided that I did not like the previous built flooring. So the flooring that I currently had was made out of the Indian bricks, and after watching the Jungle Book again, I noticed that the flooring in King Louis' temple has a slight red tint, so I opted to replicate that in my build. I tried, and I mean I really tried, using the classic pieces for that, but in the end I opted again for my trusted Indonesian temple pieces. I just love them to death, I fear. So yeah, after painting them red and putting them everywhere, I went back to placing walls. And honestly, that's mostly what I've done this day. Like, other than placing walls, I put a snake into the exhibit and placed a door on the wall so to indicate that the keepers would go there to feed the snake and to get to the souvenir shop / information center. I decided to build a little entrance doorway, again, out of the Indonesian brick pieces. I can't help it, since, like, honestly, what else am I going to use at that point? After being done, I again had a little wall building session that I mostly will spare you to see. But the important thing here is I decided on this session that I put the outer walls higher, so the higher paths would be inside of the building. And now I started worrying a bit about realism, so I decided to make a column to put it under the passing as like a construction piece. And for that I did not only use the Indonesian brick pieces, but I also used the Indian temple pieces. So yeah, claps for me, please, applause, because I didn't only use the Indonesian brick pieces, I also opted for the Indian ones. I decided to make the pillars higher so they would potentially go up to the roofs that I had yet to build. Another wall session later, I began working on the tiger overpass. But that lasted only for a few minutes before I got distracted by the habitat barrier who needed to be placed differently. And then I wanted to do the walls for the staff area before changing the pathing. So, to be honest, I think we are entering now my getting distracted at every minute phase of this build. I had so much to do at this stage, and every time I saw something that needed work, I just changed my objective. But where I was really focused was when I tried to get the orangutan to get over the staff area to the other side of his enclosure. In the end, I got really frustrated because I wanted the orangutan to have enough space in this habitat without turning the space requirements off. But I was just not able to do that because he refused to get to the other side of the habitat. It didn't matter what I do, he just didn't want it to go, and that was the time where I decided I will not have orangutans. Before worrying what should go into the habitat if it's not going to be a orangutan, I started working on the outer habitat barrier. Of course, I used my temple brick wall here to make everything look cohesive and to add more pieces to my piece count. I tried then building a nice slope for the orangutan, even though I already decided to not put him there. But in the end, I was not really satisfied with it, so I opted to do a bit stone work on the water area. After placing a few rocks, I was adamant on trying to satisfy the orangutan. I think you can call me stubborn for even trying again after I told myself that I would pick another animal, so yeah. Since he did not have enough space, I tried building him platforms so he could go above the guests and have climbing structures and more space up there. But he wasn't able to get onto the platforms, and I finally put him into the trade center and opted for another ape. So this time it was the Xiaomangs and the gibbons. My thought process was smaller animal equals smaller hitbox and easier time for me building climbable structures for them. Oh boy, how wrong I was. I can say it was very time consuming trying to get the platforms to work. I don't know what exactly the problem was, but I tried everything to get it to work. I made a little platform on the wall so they could have something to jump onto. Originally, I wanted them to climb and jump inside and outside of the building over the guests, but I was not able to get this to work and I deleted the platforms. I decided against the habitat spanning over the staff area, so now I had 3 habitats to worry about. I tried a few animals out and realized I built the habitat entrance too close to my walls, so the staff was just fly walking for a while before getting down and doing its work properly. Why can I say that? Well, anyway, in the end, Zori, who is also a fellow YouTuber, suggested I put pangolins in the habitat that was now formed, and I just went with his idea. So now I had 3 habitats: the Bengal tiger, the Siamang and gibbons, and the pangolins. Maybe this is a good time to tell you that the challenge itself only required me to build for at least 1 habitat animal. So me going crazy over here with 3 habitats was maybe not what Blob was imagining when he designed the challenge. But anyway, back to the building ahead. I took a look at the space requirements for the Siamangs and gibbons together, and that was not really doable, so I put the gibbons into the trade center. Then I only needed to worry about the Siamangs, who had just barely enough space to walk, but not enough climbing structures. But because I know myself, and I knew I would go ham on the plants, who are not always traversable, I tried finding ways to give them more walkable space without it needing to be planted. My idea was to expand the flat roof into the building so that the Siamangs could also go there. And then I worried about the floor again, because in an old temple ruin surely a few plants would grow between the bricks, right? This was also the point where I started to work on the pathing again. But of course I got sidetracked because I did not have enough light, so I quickly went to fix that. After that I began working on the entrance area by planting a lot of foliage. That was only disturbed by my need to put leaves everywhere, but after that I devoted myself to the entrance area once again, and that was the last thing I did on this day, and now we are on to day 4. It started with where I stopped the night before, the entrance area, this time the outside, where I decided to have a little flower bed. I tidied the terrain around it using Freebuild to move the terrain where I already placed pathing, but I did not think about actually planting the bed. No. I got sidetracked again, because I wanted to have temple rubble piles inside my build. So I quickly went to work to get a few different variants built, and then it was again plant time for the entrance area, since I had the urge to plant more plants. Honestly, at some point I just needed to restrict myself, because I would have put endlessly plants and roots and vines into my build. This was also the moment I decided to use both ivy variants that we have in game, and I did figure out that I did not like the plain look of the ceiling, so roots and vines for the ceiling followed quickly. And then, of course, more plants for the entrance area. I began working on the flower bed and put plants into the holes that I made into the wall. This is the moment where I'm just looking at what I built there and I'm just thinking, was I crazy? Like, how much time it cost me to plant all these foliage, and I know that I was just adding onto it and adding and adding and adding. In retrospect, I should have just let the plants be plants and moved on to more pressing matters. For example, the actual habitat viewing areas for, let's say, the pangolins, or the terrain for the pangolins. After I finally snapped out of my placing plant hypnosis, I got to work on that. And then I worked on various miscellaneous things like the water area or the viewing area for the tiger habitat, before attempting again to give the Siamangs more space in their habitat by using various climbing structures to get them to go on the flat roof. Then I decided to make a few more viewing areas for the Siamangs and put plants on the roof area. I remembered I needed to have some sort of interactive thing in the building for the guests, so I put 2 of them inside the building. One between the viewing areas for the Siamangs and the tigers at the entrance, and one next to another tiger viewing area. I went to work on the passing, and that also took me a hot minute because I wanted to have my own custom flooring on there too. So I put the flooring from the ground and put it onto the raised pass. It was a nightmare to do, especially since I decided to cover the bottom of the pass with the Indonesian brick pieces as well. When I needed a break from placing and removing bricks, I made a mud wall as the habitat barrier for the tiger and the Siamangs. I decided to make an exit area for when you exit the building, and I went a bit overboard with the pieces here, and I think this whole thing has around 3,000 pieces. When I put the exit in, I realized I needed to put the pass differently. After that was fixed, it was again brick and pass time. When half of the raised pass had bricks over and under it, I worked a bit more on the tiger overpass. I wanted to have vines as a barrier, and I think I achieved that quite well. And with that, it was the end of day 4, and we can go on to day 5. On day 5, I realized I forgot to use one of the 3 pieces we should use, namely the window you see me using now. I made a little viewing window out of them. Now I started doing the sleeping place for the tiger habitat. After that, I went back to decorating the windows I made earlier. I was again in my planting plant hypnosis, and I did not stop for a while. Just moved to another viewing window to plant foliage there. Also, I put vines everywhere, on the ceiling, on the walls, everywhere. The tiger overpass looked too barren, so I decided to put foliage there too, like one does. Now I decided to do the rest of the raised pass. I wanted first to just put the Indonesia brick pieces everywhere, but the little part that had no purpose just screamed habitat to me. So I brainstormed a bit and decided to put the pangolins in there. Of course, that was the beginning on building another habitat. As you can see here, it took me a hot minute to get everything figured out. I was really glad for 3 builds, since you can see how bad my barrier placement was. I put a little fence on both sides of the entrances and at the raised pass, so the pangolins would not escape. Then I made sure that the pangolins had everything in the habitat that they need. They have now all of the indoor area on the ground floor to roam in. I even had enough space to get 2 pangolins in there. After getting the pangolin habitat ready, I decided to put Proboscis monkeys into the old pangolin habitat. And here I put the previously deleted platforms back in and fiddled a long time around with them to get the monkeys to use them correctly. After that long time, and I really mean long time, they were finally able to climb everywhere they should climb, and I was adamant on getting the railing for the raised pass done. Now I am just putting leaves on the raised path, and that concludes the day, and we get to day 6. I started with finishing the water area with the waterfalls and the barrier for the water area that I made out of the moss rocks. After that, I got to work on the inside of the tiger habitat. When I was finished with the habitat, I went back to planting. Now I am netting the area where the tiger goes inside of the overpass, because otherwise I would not feel safe on the pass. Next I planted the Proboscis monkey habitat, but made sure to not use a lot of plants that reduce the traversable area, since the habitat is already quite on the smaller side for them. Like, they have enough space, but not by much square meters more than they need to, so I didn't want it to ruin that. The Proboscis monkey habitat was now finished, and I started doing the last touches on the Siamang habitat, mainly putting more climbing frames in there so the climbing requirement would be met. I also decided that they would have a little platform inside of the building where they could roam and climb around, so of course I needed to fence that in too, so I just used the netting that I also used for the tiger to give the Siamangs some netted cage to just wander around in. Then I am working on the tiger outside area. After that I went back to planting, and this is actually the last time I will say this in this video, because after that the only thing I needed to do was build the roof, which I promptly started on day 6, and I managed to get one like temple looking dome to get there, but like the second one I built on this day not so great. But that was all I did for day 6, and now we are finally on to the last day, day 7. Now for the roof, I had a vision that not necessarily came into fruition. I decided to have a flat roof as a base and then add the different domes onto it. The different domes were what drove the piece counts through the roof, pun intended. I made different sized domes so that it would not look the same when I assembled them together. After I had the domes placed where I wanted them to, I began on tidying them up on the inside. This meant deleting the flat roof that I previously made and then putting plants inside the roof, making it look like a proper ruin by deleting parts of the roof. I had the hope that it would decrease my piece count, but at this point it was just wishful thinking. Now I only did some last minute things that I realized while walking the path, and then I was finally able to call it done. And here you have it, the temple ruin I built in 7 days. I used approximately 30,000 pieces and it took me around 21 hours to get this build done. I hope you liked this video and I hope we will see each other in the next one. Bye!